John List is the most terrifying type of serial killer, the one you never saw coming. In 1971, the accountant murdered his family in the same meticulous and methodical manner that he did everything else. He then left the mansion where he and his wife Helen had raised their 3 children to start a new life. After disappearing for over 18 years, the story of John List's decision to kill his entire family and vanish had almost become an urban legend. Just after college, John List met his wife, Helen. Helen told John she was pregnant not long after they started dating. He married Helen after learning of her pregnancy, only to discover that she was not pregnant, a fact Helen only revealed after their marriage. Helen and John's lives began under a cloud that quickly lifted with the births of their 3 children, all of whom were born within the first 4 years of the couple's marriage. With 5 mouths to feed, John List was under pressure to provide for his family. While he is regarded as a detail-oriented and hard-working accountant, he is also odd. List struggled to keep his job because co-workers and bosses found him difficult and off-putting. His work ethic eventually prevailed, and in 1965, John List accepted a position as vice president and accountant for a bank in Jersey City, New Jersey. Following this, List relocated his mother, Alma, Helen, and their 3 children to the 19-room Victorian mansion known as Breeze Knoll in Westfield, New Jersey. Helen became increasingly unstable as the 3 List children, Patricia, John, and Frederick, reached adolescence. Helen had tertiary syphilis, which she had contracted from her first husband, who died before she met John, and she had kept it hidden from him for years. Helen started having blackouts, vision problems, and instability after they moved to New Jersey. In addition to her prescription tranquilizers, she began to self-medicate with alcohol. Helen also stopped going to church. Aside from Helen's physical and moral decline, John List was growing increasingly concerned about his children, who were entering their adolescence in the free-spirited 1960s. Patricia aspired to be an actress, and there were rumors that she dabbled in marijuana use. As John struggled with his family's morality, he was further stressed when he lost his high-paying job at the bank less than a year after obtaining it. Instead of telling his family about his loss, he got up and pretended to go to work every day. List eventually found a new job that paid less, but he soon lost it as well. This cycle continued, and Liz resorted to stealing money from Alma's bank accounts. By 1971, John List had declared bankruptcy. Faced with the humiliation of admitting to his family that they were financially bankrupt, as well as mounting evidence that they were morally bankrupt as well, John List saw only one option. He would have to kill his family while they were still alive and could enter heaven. John List awoke his children and sent them to school on November the 9th, 1971. Helen, 46, was drinking her morning coffee when he shot her in the back of the head. List then dragged her body into the ballroom on a sleeping bag. Following that, John went upstairs to his mother's apartment, where he shot and killed Alma, 84. Alma was too heavy for Liz to carry to the ballroom, so he left her where she had fallen and covered her face with a towel. While John List waited for his children to return home, he contacted their teachers and anyone else with whom they might come in contact. He informed them that the family was departing for North Carolina to care for a sick relative. He suspended their mail and newspaper deliveries before withdrawing the remainder of his mother's funds. When Patricia returned home from school, John shot her and laid her in the ballroom next to her mother. When Frederick, 13, returned home, he suffered the same fate. John drove to the soccer game of his 15-year-old son. He sat and watched John Jr. play. Then Liz took him home and shot him. John Jr. was said to have had the most offensive wounds. Liz had to shoot his adolescent multiple times. John Jr. fought back. He then laid John Jr. with the rest of the family in the ballroom. He then went about cleaning up the crime scene. He ate his dinner, did the dishes, and then went to bed while his family lay dead. The next day, John List turned down the air conditioning, turned on the lights and some classical music, and wrote a full confession to his pastor before leaving town forever. John's meticulous plan was flawless. It took a month for anyone to notice the List family's disappearance. Patricia's drama teacher decided to team up with another teacher to find out where his student had gone. As the teachers attempted to peer through the windows of the abandoned house, neighbors noticed people creeping around and called the police. Upon the arrival of the officers, the neighbors and teachers decided to enter the List home, where they discovered the partially decomposed remains of Alma, Helen, Patricia, Frederick, and John Jr., as well as a note from John List detailing the murders and his reasoning for them. John destroyed all photographs of himself and parked his car at John F. Kennedy International Airport before taking a bus into New York City and a train to Denver, Colorado. List Trail had long gone cold by the time his family and his heinous acts were discovered. John Walsh is now well known as a criminal investigator, a television personality, and victim advocate, but he got to where he is because of tragedy. John Walsh's 6-year-old son Adam was abducted from a Sears department store on July 27, 1981, and was found dead 2 weeks later. After Adam's death, John Walsh found a new purpose as the host of America's Most Wanted, a show dedicated to using the media to bring violent crimes to justice. When John Walsh learned of John List's murders, he was determined to assist in the capture of the family killer. Knowing that John List had gone unnoticed for nearly 2 decades, Walsh commissioned forensic sculptor Frank Bender to create a bust of how List would appear now. Bender collaborated with forensic psychologist Richard Walter to create a bust in the likeness of List, which was shown to the world on America's Most Wanted. The May 29, 1989 episode of America's Most Wanted was watched by 22 million people, including Wanda Flannery. Flannery and her daughter Eva Mitchell were certain that they knew who John List was impersonating. Her former neighbor Bob Clark. Clark looked exactly like the bust, even with his distinctive glasses. John List was indeed hiding as Bob Clark and had begun a new life with his new wife, Dolores Miller, who had divorced him following his arrest. John List was apprehended and brought to justice, where he was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms for the murders of his family. On March the 21st, 2008, John List died in prison from pneumonia. Several months after the murders, the mansion in New Jersey where John List lived with his family burned down. The cause of the fire was never determined, and a new house was built on the property years later. It is worth noting that the stained glass window beneath which List laid his family after their deaths was a Tiffany original, valued at more than $100,000. That window could have paid off the family's debt with money left over. Why do you think John killed his family? Was it because he was overly religious? Was it because he held resentment toward his wife? Or was it because he was just truly a coward and could not face his family after putting them into bankruptcy? Or was he just evil? Or was it all of the above? Tell me what you think in the comments.